Chapter 72, Vengeful Look. The arrival of the god's fragmented face was like the awakening of cicadas, affecting the growth of all things and forcing them to change. This change made the world cruel and cold. The formation of the Forbidden Zone caused the coldness to reach an extreme. However, at that moment Xu Qing stared at the white-clothed figure who had left. He suddenly thought of something Captain Lei had said back then. "Do you know why I proposed to take you away twice from the ruins of the city? I saw the silhouette of you cremating the corpses. At that time, the fire illuminated you while you were standing beside the blaze. You looked like you had fused with the fire. It made me feel as though I have seen a trace of warmth in this cruel world." Xu Qing fell silent. At that moment, just like Captain Lei back then, he also felt a hint of warmth. It came from the faceless woman in the white dress and the many faces who smiled and thanked him. It came from the humanity that even this cruel world couldn't take away. After a long time, Xu Qing bowed deeply again. After that, he turned and sped toward the distant city wall. Perhaps it was because he had thrown too many black pills previously. The anomalous substances in the city lord's residence area became extremely dense and broke through the critical point. It was like flames in the night, attracting countless gazes and attention. Or maybe it was his karma with this city. Hence, Xu Qing, who was currently speeding away, didn't encounter much danger. He successfully arrived at the city wall. Standing there, Xu Qing turned his head and glanced at the city in the dark. He then heard roars and mournful cries from afar. He silently stared at them for a long time. "I wonder when the next time will be," Xu Qing mumbled. He then cast his gaze toward the dark city before turning and leaping off the city wall, speeding into the distance. To increase his speed, he took out the flying talisman he had obtained and pasted it on his leg. After the spirit energy surged into his body, his speed erupted explosively and he directly soared into the air. He whistled through the air and left. As the wind blew onto his face, Xu Qing felt a little uncomfortable. This sudden burst of speed and flight also took him a long time to get used to. This was especially so for flying. It was the first time in his life. The feeling of flying in the sky, the feeling of lowering his head to look at the earth with the world under his feet, made Xu Qing feel a little dazed. He felt as though he had become the surviving bird spreading their wings in the sky after the god opened its eyes. So this is what it feels like for a bird to fly in the sky. Xu Qing mumbled, trying his best to control his body. As for him who had reached the 7th level of the mountains and seas art, he could already control his body perfectly. Hence, Xu Qing quickly got used to this state of soaring in the air. Coupled with his speed and strength, he would step out fiercely from time to time after landing on the ground. He then punched backwards in the air, causing his speed to be even faster. From afar, he looked like a long rainbow as he sped through the air above the Forbidden Zone. If it was someone else, they would still have to worry about the influx of anomalous substances. However, to Xu Qing, he didn't have to worry about this. Hence, his speed could continue to increase. Not long later, he saw the boundary of the Forbidden Zone from afar. With a dash, his entire person charged out of the Forbidden Zone. The instant he arrived in the outside world, the warm wind blew on his body, dispelling the chill in the Forbidden Zone. Standing in midair, Xu Qing was silent. He lifted his head and looked in the direction of Antler City before turning his head to scan another direction. After living at the scavenger campsite for half a year, Xu Qing knew a lot of things. He also understood the area he lived in. This allowed him to know the names and locations of many nearby cities, including the King Consec's Mountain Gate. At that moment, although the sky was still dark, the ground wasn't completely pitch black under the illumination of the moonlight. One could faintly see the undulating mountains in the distance. Xu Qing, who was standing in the air, shifted his gaze several times between Antler City and the King Consect. 2. "I can't accept this," Xu Qing mumbled. He didn't know what would happen to the King Consec's ancestor who had fallen into the ruined city. 1. However, Xu Qing felt that there was a high chance that the other party wouldn't die. Nevertheless, it was inevitable for him to be in a sorry state and suffer heavy injuries. Also, the possibility of him escaping in a short period of time wasn't high. Right now, if he were to head to Antler City, everything should go smoothly. However, he felt very uncomfortable leaving just like that. Hence, after a few breaths of silence, a cold glint appeared in the youth's eyes. With a sway of his body, he unleashed his full speed. Amidst the intense fluctuations emitted by the flight talisman, he headed straight for the King Khan sect. 1. Xu Qing didn't choose to head to Antler City immediately. He wanted to make a trip to the King Khan sect. 1. He was prepared to take advantage of the fact that the King Khan sect's ancestor was trapped and the two elders were dead. The entire sect was in an unprecedented state of weakness, so he wanted to go there and take revenge on the other party's pursuit. 1. This was Xu Qing's personality. If it was anyone else, their first choice would probably be to leave. However, Xu Qing's experiences since he was young made him understand that the hidden danger had to be erased. Even if this hidden danger exceeded the scope of his solution and couldn't be erased in a short period of time, he still had to make the other party feel pain as much as possible. This pain could only become a form of deterrence when it reached a certain level. This was the law of survival in the slums and also the law of scavengers. As for whether it was the law of this chaotic world, Xu Qing didn't know, but this was his law. After killing the two elders, Xu Qing felt that the deterrence wasn't enough. At that moment, Xu Qing was speeding toward the King Khan sect. When the first rays of the sun rose into the sky and shone on the ground, Xu Qing sought his destination from afar. 1. The mountain gate of the King Khan sect. 1. The sect was built on top of a mountain peak, surrounded by numerous buildings. Under the sunlight, the main hall at the top of the mountain seemed to be emitting a glow. From afar, it looked extraordinarily imposing. It was just that most of the cultivators in the sect had gone out to search and hadn't returned yet. Hence, there weren't many disciples guarding the mountain gate. In the early morning, he occasionally saw figures. Their expressions were filled with arrogance, as though their presence here represented their supreme status. Among them, there were 3 to 5 disciples chatting and laughing beside the arch bridge at the mountain gate. Their talk was mostly related to the fact that the ancestor had gone out to search for the child. What they expressed was that they felt that the ancestor was making a mountain out of a molehill. Some were sitting cross-legged and cultivating in their respective residences. As for the sect master, he was currently sitting in the main hall. He held a book in his hand that recorded the accounts of the offerings in the nearby cities and campsites. His expression was indifferent as he flipped through it. Just like the disciples outside, he didn't think much of the ancestor's departure. He's just a scavenger. Even if he has some capabilities, the two elders are enough to suppress him. There's no need for the ancestor to personally take action. The sect is going to be empty now. The sect master shook his head and thought to himself that there was nothing he could do about this. No one dared to disobey the words of the old ancestor. Just when the entire sect was in a state of laziness, Xu Qing, who was high up in the sky and nobody noticed, lowered his head and cast a cold glance. He first sensed the direction of the wind, then circled around to the area with the downwind to measure the wind speed and the distance it could travel. In the end, he chose a location and didn't give the King Khan sect cultivators any chance to react. He then took out a large amount of poison powder and expressionlessly scattered them one by one. Xu Qing had a lot of poison powder on him. At that moment, he used 80% of it. With so much poison powder mixed together, the toxicity was already extremely shocking. At that moment, the poison powder drifted toward the King Khan sect in the wind. Xu Qing didn't act immediately but waited. Time flowed by bit, because there was too much poison powder. When it spread out in the wind, the sky slowly seemed to be dyed in color. At the moment when it vaguely turned into a black wind, a cold glint flashed in Xu Qing's eyes. It's about time. The appearance of this black wind quickly attracted the attention of the King Khan sect cultivators. The first people who saw were the few chatting disciples at the mountain gate. They lifted their heads in surprise and were stunned when they saw the black wine. What's that? However, at the next instant, when a wisp of black wind blew past a tree in the distance, causing it to instantly wither, the expressions of these few disciples changed drastically. Poison! As cries of surprise rang out. The disciples in the sect who discovered this scene were all shaken. One after another, figures rapidly walked out of the sect. All of their expressions changed and they were just about to cast a spell to disperse the poison wind. However, at that moment, Xu Qing's figure suddenly rushed out from the sky. His speed was so fast that he transformed into a bolt of lightning that sprinted toward the sect's mountain gate. From afar, his figure was like a bolt of lightning that fell into the human world, directly charging into the sect. Amidst the shock and anger of those King Khan sect cultivators, as the alarm bell of the entire sect rang out, The rumbling sound spread in all directions and Xu Qing suddenly landed on the ground. He was located halfway up the mountain of the King Kong sect. A loud bang rang out from the ground and numerous cracks spread out. Xu Qing, who was inside, abruptly lifted his head. His gaze was filled with intense killing intent as he directly charged toward the many King Kong sect cultivators who had shocked expressions on their faces. A loud bang erupted. Xu Qing's attacks were swift and fierce, and his speed was astonishing. Everywhere he passed by, miserable cries would ring out and corpses would scatter everywhere. However, even though there weren't many disciples in the King Kong sect, there were still some. Hence, very soon, amidst waves of furious roars, numerous figures gathered from all directions and rushed toward Xu Qing. Enemy attack! Damn it! Someone actually dared to attack our King Kong sect. Kill him! At that moment, the sect master in the main hall also sensed it. He quickly walked out in shock and anger. He saw the chaos in the sect and the poisonous wind that spread out. All disciples consumed the poison-repelling pills immediately and dispelled the poison wind. His expression suddenly changed as he quickly ordered the sect. At the same time, he locked onto the location of the explosion halfway up the mountain. His eyes were filled with coldness as he immediately rushed over. However, Xu Qing's attack was incomparably fast. He didn't tangle with these King Kong sect disciples, but walked around and waved his hand, tossing out black pills one after another. Some of these black pills landed on the ground and some were still in the air. However, they exploded at the same time, forming a vortex that attracted anomalous substances. This caused the anomalous substances that were everywhere in the world to seem to have come alive and were instantly attracted over. Anomalous substances, when the surrounding King Kong sect disciples who wanted to rush over sensed this scene. Their expressions changed and they instinctively retreated. However, there were still a few people who were at the center of the vortex. Under these dense anomalous substances, their bodies quickly turned greenish-black. How dare you! A furious roar rang out from the direction of the main hall on the mountain peak. The figure of the King Kong sect master suddenly arrived. His cultivation fluctuations at the perfected Che condensation realm surpassed the elder Xu Qing had killed. This was the second strongest expert in the King Kong sect other than the old ancestor. At this moment, his golden robe was bulging and his expression was gloomy. The killing intent in his eyes was intense. However, after seeing Xu Qing's scavenger attire and age, his entire body trembled. It's you. He didn't need to guess as he already had an answer in his heart. The moment this answer appeared, a huge wave rose in the heart of the King Kong sect master.